This week on the Destination Angler.
We have to fish structure. You have to fish those flies. You have to put it where it needs to be just 1,000 times a day just to have a chance.
Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haig. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa.
Hey anglers, welcome back to another episode of the Destination Angler, brought to you by Anglers Coffee, perfecting the coffee experience for the fly fishing community and anglers everywhere with small batch coffee delivered to your doorstep. It's darn near perfect. By New England Nets, makers of handmade landing nets of exceptional quality that will complement your catch of a lifetime. And by Trout Routes, the #1 fishing app, helping you find new trout water so you spend less time on the road and more time doing what you love, trout fishing. Coming up on the Destination Angler, we're headed to Cuba, which is like stepping back in time to chase bonefish, tarpon, and permit. And then we explore the Clarion River in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for monster brown trout. And be sure to backcast to catch the last episode of the Destination Angler on the beautiful Kern River in California, home of the golden trout, with Guy Jeans, owner of the Kern River Fly Shop. If you're looking for seclusion, the Kern is where it's at. The top 50 miles are roadless wilderness. And remember to hit that subscribe button to catch all the Destination Angler episodes coming your way. Hey, and if you like the show, please tell a buddy. Want to be the first to know about new episodes? Well, head on over to the Destination Angler website and become a subscriber. You'll be registered to win a beautiful handmade wooden New England net valued at $135. I have one of these gems and absolutely love it. And this week's winner is Andy from Wyoming, Michigan. Congrats, Andy, and thank you for listening. And today on the Destination Angler, we are replaying one of my favorite episodes on the White River in northern Arkansas. Today, our guest is Chad Johnson, owner of CJ's White River Outfitters in Flippin, Arkansas. Chad's a longtime guide on the world-famous White River near Mountain Home, Arkansas. And man, let me tell you, if you want a shot at a 10-pound brown trout, Chad's your man, and the White River is the place to go. Chad, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you. Thanks for having me today.
You bet.
We're very excited to be working with you guys at the Destination Anglers today.
You bet. You bet. Well, Chad, let's start with your background. So you've got quite a story. Tell us a little bit. How did you get into guiding? Because you're from Mississippi originally, right?
That's right. And there's not much guiding going on in Mississippi unless you're headed down to the coast for redfish. You know, there's a few things, but like not in our fly fishing world, right?
Yeah.
So I'd kind of been running around with a cousin of mine doing some windsurfing and rock climbing, snowboarding and that type of thing. And he says, all right, it's time for our annual fly fishing trip. And I remember so specifically telling him, like, I don't give a crap about that fly fishing. But I'll come up and I'll go climbing while y'all go fish, and I'll just camp with you boys. And I'd fished all my life growing up, but me and Dad, you know, I mean, we were hoop netting and trout lining and catfishing, living on the Perl River in Mississippi, so I'd never really experienced fly fishing. And about 2 weeks before I come up on that trip, I broke my arm on a motocross track. And I couldn't climb and I couldn't work, so I come up and I fished with them anyway, and I come to camp with them anyway, and ended up wrapping the old cast up and fishing, and I caught 4 fish in 4 days. And I remember going home and telling my wife, like, oh my God, I got to buy these fly rods, and I got to buy a boat, and I got to buy waders. And she's going, oh my God, you must have had this amazing trip. And I was like, well, I caught 4 fish. She goes, hold on, like, Chad, why do you want to go back? Like, that's horrible. And I was like, yeah. They were the 4 coolest fish I've ever caught in my life. She goes, oh, they were big? I was like, no, they weren't big. And she was like, well, what was cool about them? And I was like, you know, I think it's just because I caught them on a fly rod.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a new awakening for us, both me and her, that like, hey, hold on, we make this fishing fun. This isn't like we always grew up, throw up, me and my wife both, throw a big chunk of something out, involves a lot of setting, heck, maybe even a bail on the end of your rod. It's not quite the activity that this fly fishing become for us.
So you were hooked on fly fishing then. Were you trout fishing? What were you catching?
Well, I tell you what I done. We were making multiple trips up. I was probably coming up 3 times a year here and fishing the white. But the coast was closer to me. So I really immediately bought a little skiff, and I went down and I started red fishing the Louisiana, Mississippi coast.
I see.
And I had full intentions of moving down to the coast and guiding because my wife's family's from Louisiana. And Katrina happened. And the year Katrina happened, all my guide buddies down there told me, like, don't come here. We don't have any work. We don't have lodging. Like, we don't know how long it's going to be before we're back up and going. So I left my wife in Mississippi. I sold my homestead. I sold my business, and I moved to Arkansas and took like a $10 an hour construction job, and just started going up to the fly shop owned by Gary Hansen. It was called Mountain River at the time. And just started going up every day when I got off work and stocking shelves and tying flies and sweeping floors. And finally, Mr. Gary says, Chad, what are you doing? And I said, well, I figured if I come and showed you how hard I work, you would hire me. And he goes, are you serious? That's what you're doing? And I said, well, I'm not just in here working for the fun of it. And he goes, well, I've never seen that before. Go put in your 2-week notice. And so that's kind of how I got started at the shop. I kind of bullied my way in a little bit. I found that if you go somewhere and work for free, eventually they'll pay you.
That's great. Now you're head guide at Dallas, right?
Sure. The way it ended up being was I actually worked there in shop for a couple of years, and then Gary Hansen sold the business to a gentleman out of Georgia, and I worked for him for a couple of years there. And then Steve Daly and Jim Dugan come in and bought the place. And when they come in and bought the place, that was kind of the point that I become head guide. And I quit working in the shop as much. And obviously I was out on the river much, much, much more, and to the point that I didn't have any time to work in the shop anymore. So to be able to keep me, that was what we done. They just positioned me as head guide, and we've worked together for many years.
Okay.
Still the outfit that I use in town. They do all of my advertising. We do tons of their fishing. Over the years, me and Dally have kind of put our little fly shop on the map.
You're right. Yeah, it's a good one.
And it is a really good shop, and Steve does a really good job running it.
He does. And I've fished with Steve before. He was my guide once. Great guy. Really had a good day with him.
Oh, great.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. Now, for all your listeners, Chad's probably too humble to tell you this, but Chad's he's an author. He's been on videos. He's been on other podcasts. He's been featured in Gray Sporting Journal, Eastern Fly Fishing Magazine, American Angler, Fly Fisherman, Outdoor Life, written several book chapters around nymphing and some other things. And so we're really fortunate to have Chad on the call today. And Chad, I wanted to also...
Oh, that was nice of you. Heck, yeah. I didn't even know that I'd been in a couple of those. That's good.
Yeah. But back to the fishing. So, Chad, all the listeners probably want to hear how you catch those monster brown trout. And it's kind of a seasonal thing, right. Isn't it? Right? I mean, it's sort of, you do that in the wintertime to get the big ones. Am I right about that? Or tell us about that.
Yes, sir. So the winter fishing is definitely our best opportunity of getting the biggest brown trout of the year with any consistency. There'll always be a decent fish caught through the summer. It's not like this is the only time of year they can be put in the boat, but this appears to be when they're most aggressive. And what it appears to be is that when these brown trout come off the beds, and they are super aggressive because they've been running off so many fish and protecting their beds and fighting against other male brown trout and that type thing, that these fish get super aggressive that time of year. And then they're hungry because they've been sitting on the beds,
Yeah.
So when they come off, they come off strong and they feed hard before they lay down. Now, that does not mean this is an easy task. I'll put this out there. I have busted 30 inches with a customer a couple of times, but me personally, I have never busted 30 inches.
Yeah.
And that puts things into perspective for people, because they see all of these monster fish we catch and they think, oh my God, I'm going to come to the White River and these big brown trout are just going to jump in my boat. That is not the case.
Yeah.
We got guys that have been coming for years looking for that monster fish. Now, mind you, I have multiple fish, 29 and a half. Like, when it comes to these big guys, if you're looking for your trophy, we don't give you anything, right?
Yeah.
I've got 3 personally at 29 and a half, but I've never broke 30.
Right.
29 and a half, hitting 30.
I'd be okay with 29 and a half.
Absolutely. But one of the couple of things that does is that lets you know that, like, when we put a number up, like, it's a legit number, you know, we won't even give it to ourselves. But
Right.
like, those monster fish are earned through the winter. And the way we typically do it is we're throwing 5 to 7 inch streamers, typically articulated, because we like a hook in the back end.
Yeah.
We're fishing full sinking lines on 7 to 9 weight rods, generally a 8 weight, but you can drop down or you can drop up a weight, depending on what size flies you're throwing.
Right.
Generally, through the winter, we're going to have higher flows. So it's going to be big water. And for most people, it's bigger water than they're used to seeing or fishing. Like, the White River is a big river. And so what I would say about coming and hunting and fishing that time of year for these big buck brown trout are, come with your A game. Know that you are on a hunt and that you may or may not find your quarry.
Right.
That if you consider yourself like getting it in the water and bringing it back to the boat fishing, that will not put brown trout in your boat during the winter on the White River. We have to fish structure. You have to fish those flies. You have to put it where it needs to be just 1,000 times a day just to have a chance.
And you might hook one of these in a weekend, or what have you seen there?
No. So as a general day, we're going to have a couple of fish. I mean, you can never tell what a day is going to be like. But general day, you're going to have, you know, you're going to move 5 or 6 fish and hopefully land 2 of them. And hopefully one of those is a big one.
Right.
That should give you a pretty typical streamer day. I've had it where you blow out and get 3 over 2 foot in one day, and I've had it where we go out and get a couple of 20 inchers, right? So it really, you know, we preach to our guys, conditions. We hope that the day you get here is the right conditions for us to pick that big one in the boat.
Yeah.
And there's no way for us to know that a year in advance. And so we just book our dates just like we do anywhere else, and we come and we swing for the fences that time of year. So as a general rule, we're starting this beginning of January. So it's going to run through January, February, and maybe the first week or so of March, depending on when they drop that water out. Once they drop that water out for March, the streamer fishing is going to decline.
Right.
And so it's January, February, first couple of weeks of March would be our streamer season. But, and I don't know if I'm easing into another topic here, but I know that, like, the big streamer fishing is super sexy right now across the country because it's new, it's young, it's fresh. But we need not exclude 90% of our fly fishermen are not big streamer fishermen.
Yeah.
And I feel like so often people look at the White River now and go, oh, them boys are over there getting those big brown trout. But you've got to be able to throw 8 weight sinking lines and big streamers, and you can only do it when it's freezing cold. That is not the case on the White River.
Right.
One of the beautiful things about the Ozarks is we're a year-round fishery.
That's great.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as soon as that big streamer bite is over, what are you looking at in the middle of March? Boom, they're going to start seeing some bugs. Okay. So by the 1st of April, we have a caddis hatch that is so prolific, it'll blow your mind. Bugs hatching in the cup holders, browns going nuts. Like at that point, to be able to catch 10 browns a day is just commonplace.
Hey, anglers. Well, you've heard me talking about Angler's Coffee now for over a year now, and I have a question for you. Have you tasted it yet? If you have, then you know what I'm talking about. It's darn good coffee, isn't it? And if you're like me, tasting's believing. And believe me, this coffee tastes great. My wife and I are hooked on it. That's because Angler's Coffee offers an impressive spectrum of flavor profiles, so there's something for everyone. Like their smooth, medium roast elk hair caddis blend. Using beans from Central America and Indonesia with a perfect balance of body and aroma, the caddis blend gives creamy sweet tasting notes of milk chocolate and clove. It's a real crowd pleaser. Save 10% with a custom subscription like I did and pick the coffee blends you want delivered to your doorstep. If you're not 100% satisfied, they'll give you your money back, no questions asked. A percentage of each sale goes to some great nonprofit organizations that directly impact the fly fishing community. So put a smile on your face and give it a shot. That's anglerscoffee.com. Tasting's believing. Huge news, folks. The #1 fishing app, and I'm talking trout routes here, has been updated to include the entire lower 48. That's 50,000 streams mapped and classified into 4 categories and 350,000 hand-curated public access points marked and ready for you to explore. You know, there's nothing more exciting than finding that new trout streamer access point. I'm a huge fan of trout routes because they make it so easy. Say goodbye to stumbling around country roads looking for your next spot, because Trout Routes provides every detail you need for each stream, including public and private bridges, stream flows, trail access, where to park, camping opportunities, boat ramps, and more. No service, no problem. You can save maps for offline use. With Trout Routes, I've found dozens of new streams and access points I never would have known about. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for Trout Routes today on your Apple or Android phone. You know, we were down there, Chad. I was going to just tell you, we were down there in late May and June. I've been down there a couple times, and we had, and I brought a big group of guys down there from my church, and we had one boat that netted 50 fish in a day. So, you know, if you're looking to, if you want to bend a rod, you want to catch a lot of those rainbows that you've got in there. Yeah, spring, summer is a great time to do that.
Well, absolutely, but I don't want to slip past the brown trout at that time of year. So you're right. Like you can put 50, but where people are getting mixed up is that we're only catching our brown trout, our big brown trout during the winter.
Oh, okay.
During that caddis hatch, notorious, like last year, I had a 27-incher on a caddis pupa.
Wow.
Okay. So catching those fish up to 10 a day between, 17 and 2 foot is commonplace during the caddis season.
Yeah.
Well, so see, anybody can come throw our caddis. So they can come catch those brown trout. So the brown trout, the very nice big brown trout, are not limited to your streamer fishermen.
Mm-hmm.
I get those on bugs during the caddis season as well. Now, we may not get those over 2 foot very often. I just told you I caught a 27 last year, but that's a crazy case. Normally, it's those, like I said, 17 to 2 foot.
Yeah.
And then we'll come off of that into May and we'll get a sulfur hatch. We'll fish that the same way. And then we'll go right into our summer patterns with girdle bugs and hoppers and terrestrial style bugs, where we are still staying on brown trout on the banks, catching them on hoppers and girdle bugs and the tricks we have that you can come and nymph up these browns during the spring or the summer.
Yeah.
And catch super nice brown trout. You will not be limited to rainbows just because you're not here during the winter.
Right. Yeah. Now, you said earlier that the White's a big river, and I can certainly vouch for that. It gets really wide, several hundred yards across in some areas, and it's a tailwater, right? So it's super nutrient rich.
Yes, sir.
And the water is a pretty consistent temperature. So that probably helps quite a bit for your year-round fishing opportunities, right?
It does, because we don't have the big temperature swings where, say it gets too hot, and in a lot of places you really got to lay off those trout because of temperature, those sort of things. With us being a tailwater, and as a general rule during the summer when it does get hot, they're running a little more water, which keeps it super cool. We don't have any type of fish kills. In my 15 years here, I can recall one low summer where they didn't run for like a month and the water got really warm. And so like in 15 years of being here, I can remember one year that we had warm water. And so it's just not really a scenario for us.
Yeah, right. So it's usually pretty darn good.
Ours is more, our catching fish is more what food source in the river has got them triggered for us right now. More so than, are they going to eat this time of year? Is it too cold? Is it too hot? It doesn't really get that way. It's just what food source are we going to present to them for that given season.
I see. Okay, that's great. You were telling me before the show that you've gotten to be friends with Dave Whitlock. Can you tell me a little bit about that
Yeah.
relationship you have with Dave? Because I'm sitting here looking at a bottle of Dave's Fleximent on my fly tying bench right now, and I've known him since I was a kid, right? So how did you get to know Dave Whitlock?
Super lucky. I began to catch some of his big brown trout, and I say his because of the story I'll get into here. Mr. Dave Whitlock, back in the 80s, came up with a box called a Vibram box, and it was designed to hold wild brown trout eggs, just like a red. You bury it in the river, the eggs can hatch out in it, and now you're hatching out eggs in the river to grow up in the river and hopefully reproduce. So in the early 80s, he got his, both on the Little Red, which is 2 hours south of us, on the Norfolk, and on the White River. He planted these Vibram boxes with over 500 Vibram boxes a year on each of those three rivers from 1980 to 1990. So it was a 10-year program. And he stocked each three of those rivers for 10 years. Now, to date, each one of those three rivers has a wild brown trout population, and each one of those rivers has produced a world record.
Wow.
Dave Whitlock gets very, very little credit for what he done back in the day. The actual Arkansas Game and Fish Commission will just tell you that that's their hatchery fish out there growing.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the case. The Little Red was actually only stocked once by the government in the 80s.
I see.
We know that one stocking from the state did not produce the number of brown trout on that river that's on that river from one stocking.
Right.
This is from the 10 years of Whitlock planting the Vibram boxes. All of those down there are wild. And so anyway, long story long here, once I started catching those, I was seeing him at shows. And so I just walked up to him one day, and I knew of his program. And I just went, Mr. Dave, I'm Chad Johnson, and I just want to tell you how much I appreciate what you've done for our rivers back in the day that you've never gotten any credit for. And he just kind of looked at me and he was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, well, all of your planting, and his eyes lit up, And I started showing him these pictures, and I was like, thank you, dude. Like,
yeah,
holy crap. You made my career. You've given us what we have today. Nobody's ever even given you credit for it. And so I began to, every time I seen him at show, I would go over and I would give him a picture of the latest, biggest one I caught. And then I would time a fly that I caught it on. And I'd give him the fly I caught it on, and I'd give him a picture or show him the picture of it.
That's great.
And we just started hitting it off. I mean, like, next thing I knew, we were in a boat together, and like, he is such a character. Very first day we're in a boat, and we're putting in at Rim Shoals, and his wife Emily had done jumped in the boat, and I go to push down the edge of the boat to let him get in, and he just stops and looks at me. He's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I was just pushing down the edge of my boat so you could get in." And he goes, "Ha!" like that, and he throws his leg up, just one leg up over the gunnel, and leans over on the side of the boat like a freaking 15-year-old boy and starts tying his flies on. He goes, "I won't be needing no help." And I was like, oh God. I thought the very first thing I'd done was like pissed him off before we got in the boat, you know.
Yeah, just a little bit. Wow.
Oh yeah. And so then we start easing off, and he goes, "Well, Johnson, you know what today is, don't you?" And I was like, "No, sir." And he goes, "Well, let's just say there'll be a report card at the end of the day." And I was like, oh my God.
What does he mean by that?
And I'm meaning like, he'll see how I do as a guy.
Okay.
Like, he's going to give me a report card at the end of the day.
Oh, you were guiding. You were
just how well I do.
You were more than just fishing with him. You were guiding him.
I was taking him and his wife out on a guide trip. I say a guide trip. I wasn't making them pay. It's Dave Whitlock.
Right.
I offered to take him on a fishing trip, but I guided him.
I got you.
I didn't let him row and me go fishing. And we started easing out, and he goes, "Well, you know, there'll be a report card today." And I was getting nervous as can be. I'm going to guide him on a river he planted all these fish on that he's been fishing 20 years longer than I have.
Yeah.
And I'm supposed to take him somewhere, you know. And we get about 20 yards down the river, and Emily goes, "Chad, you've never been out with Mr. Dave before." I said, "No, ma'am." She goes, "If you don't start punching back at him, he's going to rag you all day long."
You got to fight back with him, huh? That's so funny.
And that just started like the most amazing relationship. Like, I have learned more from Dave Whitlock over the last 10 years than any other one fly fisherman I know.
And he's a special guy, and he's in his 80s now, right?
He's 85, and he is a dadgum go-getter. I know this week he's over finishing a big portrait this week. Like, I mean, he hadn't slowed down a bit.
Wow.
It's insane. I still get to fish with him quite a bit. I'll go over to his house and stay there with them, and we go fish stripers in Oklahoma. Or he'll come over here and we'll get to fish here. I'll tell you one quick little deal about him there. So he tells me one day, I'm really confused because I'm nymphing up these really nice brown trout, and I'm fishing a caddis pupa to a midge. And these fish are eating the midge instead of the caddis pupa during the caddis hatch. And I know that it's the caddis hatch that has these browns going, so it just didn't make any sense to me. So I go up to him at a show, and I go, "All right, Dave, I got a question here." I said, "I got these two flies right here," and I explained to him that they were eating the midge during the caddis pupa instead of the big old caddis, and that's what had them going. And he goes, I said, "Mr. Dave, what do you think that is?" And he goes, "Well, Chad, best I can figure," he goes, "if you had two turds in your hand, which one would you eat?" And I said, "Well, I guess I'd eat the little one so I didn't have to eat so much turd." And he goes, "Yeah, I think that's what they're doing." And I said, "Dave, are you just calling my flies, man?" And he goes, "Oh, don't worry about it, Johnson. We'll work on it."
That's hilarious.
And then he says, "Oh, I'm just messing with you, Johnson. You know me. I just like to catch my browns on pretty flies." I know we have to move on. I'm going to do one more little tidbit here. So,
yeah,
I was going up and fishing this place. This just tells you what kind of guy that he is. I was going up and fishing this place, and as you well know, I'm a streamer guy. So, in my mind for years, anywhere I went through my big streamers, I was going to catch the biggest fish in the creek. That's just the way it was. I might not catch as many of them, but I was going to catch the biggest. Well, I was going to this fishery, and I come back, and we had the best trip we ever had on smallmouth, and me and the Levin brothers, and I told him, and he was like, "Ooh, Chad, you didn't get the best of that river." We had caught 18 smallmouth over 18 inches, and we were like, "Oh, my God," like we whooped them. And he goes, "Nope, boys, nope, you didn't get the best of that river." I was like, "Dave, man, we whooped him." He's like, "I'm sorry, boys. I know it was a trip of your life, but you didn't do it." I said, "Okay, tell me what I need to do." And so Dave writes me this 6-page letter on how he would fish this river. And he tied me a box of flies that he would do it with. And they were the silliest looking little flies. I mean, I literally called him and was like, "Dave, dude, we aren't just trying to catch smallmouth. We know we can catch smallmouth on these little bugs you sent us. We're trying to catch the biggest ones. We aren't trying to catch numbers." And he goes, "Chad, this is only for the big ones." I went, "Oh boy, here we go." And but it's Dave Whitlock, right? So of course we whip some up and we take up there with us, and we fished the same number of days, and we had 36 over 18 inches.
Wow.
Because we listened to what Mr. Dave said, and we went finesse, and because of where these fish were, they were scared of getting eaten by a muskie, so they ate better on the finesse bite than they did chasing a streamer 15 foot out, because they could get their butts eat too.
That's interesting.
And he had the wherewithal of putting that together, and I went and fished finesse and tripled my big fish catch.
Wow.
He's one fishy dude, man.
Yeah, he's got it figured out. Well, Chad, that brings me to the next subject, and that's really that, what I love about northern Arkansas is there's so many different fishing opportunities and experiences there, right? You've got some other rivers like the North Fork.
Yes, sir.
You can catch an Arkansas slam on the North Fork, a brown, a rainbow, a brook, and a cutthroat, right? And there's some other there's some other rivers around there too, isn't there? Some warm water fisheries.
We have some other opportunities as well. Yes, one major that's it's one of those places that you need to see because of the scenic views, on top of really good smallmouth fishing, is the Buffalo National River. So Buffalo is one of our first national rivers.
And what does that mean? What's a national river? It
was deemed just like they deemed the Yellowstone Park a national park. Okay. They deemed the Buffalo a national river. So it's actually handled by the feds, not by the state. That's a federal river. Yep. Deemed because of its scenic routes, just like any of your parks.
Oh, neat. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so Dally's holds a very unique permit to be able to guide on that river.
Oh, that's something else. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll talk about this later, but like if we were going to guide on the Buffalo, we would book through Dally's and use his permit. Mm-hmm. If you were going to guide for the other rivers, you would book through my CJ's White River Outfitters.
I see.
But I can work all that out when you call me if anybody wanted to fish the Buffalo. I would just really like to tell you about the rivers here real quick. We'll get off all that. So it is kind of the area that we do so much is there's a lower section that has 24 miles with no access. And so we do a program where we camp for 2 nights on the river. We cook for you. We set up camp. We have me and the Levin brothers guide you. We have somebody there to cook for you, and we do that big 3-day, 2-night deal on the lower wilderness section. And then we also do some day trips on kind of the middle section. But then we also have Crooked Creek. Crooked Creek is just a premier little smallmouth fishery, but it's pretty small in that we do a couple of different things. I will put somebody in a canoe with me when the water's super low and fish them out of the front of the canoe. When it gets even lower than that, we go to kayaks and just early spring, if you got here, you know, just at the right time, I can get my drift boat down.
Okay.
Right. It is a little more volatile in the time frame you have to get down it. Right.
Yeah.
The buffalo is going to stay a little more steady water, let us on it a little bit longer. Where Crooked Creek, once it dumps out, it gets to where we have to take kayaks.
Pretty
Still
small.
really good fishing.
Okay.
Yep, creek smallmouth. And then we have like on the North Fork of the White, which is right above Norfolk Lake. It's the tailwater that runs into the North Fork.
Mm-hmm.
We have major white bass and striper runs this time of year.
Ah.
And so just a couple of days ago, I was up around the north end of the lake, and we were just surrounded by balls of 6-pound hybrids breeding, just thousands of them, you know.
Wow.
And so this time of year during the spring, like we've got some really good temperate bass runs.
Okay.
That are phenomenal.
Yeah.
Then we also have, like, you know, sometimes people come over, they want to hit the White or the North Fork, and the water isn't quite right for them to be able to wade, and they didn't want to hire a guide. Well, we also have a place called the Spring River.
Okay.
Which is obviously a spring creek, and it's about an hour from here, and it holds really good rainbows.
Okay.
And that would be a much smaller, pretty much always wadeable river unless they had some kind of weird flood stage or something. And then the North Fork itself, where we were talking about those temperate bass running, you know, that is a premier wild trout fishery as well. That's only an hour away. And it is not a tailwater. It's a spring creek, and it's generally wadeable. So where a lot of people at times go, oh, you know, we want to come over to the White, and we want to stay, and we want to wade, but it's a little iffy because the water can be messed up.
Yeah.
Those guys are not messed up. There's several little places around that you can always wade within an hour's drive. And then there are a ton of little smallmouth creeks around you can wade as well.
Okay. Well, that's great because, you know, there are a lot of people that, you know, maybe people want to come down for a long weekend. They can afford to hire a guide for a day or two, and they may have evenings free. And, you know, if they're generating, it's difficult to jump into the White or the North Fork to wade, but there's these other options, right?
Absolutely, there's options.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. There's always somewhere to go, and, like, you know, I always, when people are staying at my cabin or my lodge is right here on Crooked Creek, I always try to give my guys, like, what's going on in the area for that time. You know, if they're here and they're going, okay, we want to do some stuff, what is there? You know, I try to let them know, okay, Spring River's hot, this is hot, and this is hot. Those are one of the three places I'd go right now.
Yeah.
Even if they're not fishing with me, right? They can use me as their fishing knowledge or resource.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they're staying in my cabin. Yep.
Right. Yeah. And your cabin, you've got some pictures online of your cabin. It looks beautiful. And I know that you've been working on that for a while, up high overlooking.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So.
Yes, sir. I have been working on it about 4 years, built it all myself. And you can go online at CJ's White River Outfitters and look at all of that. We're just opening it up here. It is right on the creek I was talking about. That's one of our premier smallmouth streams. So, like, whether you got off of a guide trip with me or one of my guides and wanted to go fishing on your own, or whether you didn't hire a guide and was just here to fish for the weekend, you are on a smallmouth fishery at my camp.
Okay. And Chad, so you run individual trips and you also run corporate trips. What's the best way to get a hold of you? Just go to your website, or what's the best way, Chad?
The best way to get a hold of me is go on my website, and we have a contact us, and you'll be getting my wife on the phone when you call. She's very good at setting up all the programs and the guide trips. And then if I need to step in, I will, and more than happy to talk to anybody that wants to call and chat about it. And what you would do is I give a discount on my cabin if you're fishing with my outfitter service. And you can book through my outfitter service, and I can do I do a lot of group trips. I only only do groups of 6 in my cabin. It has 8 beds. You're welcome to put that many people in it, but I generally try to run 3 boat groups out of here.
Okay.
Not to be overcrowded. And then I do some corporate trips that I have some other lodges that help me, and I can put all my guys up together. I do some 20-person trips and some 25-person and some 10-person corporate group trips where I cover everything.
Right.
I cover the food, the lodging, the guides, be able to just give you one total sum. And I do quite a few of those corporate trips where guys are,
Right.
tired of going to Vegas or to the cities or doing whatever it is their companies have them doing. And they're ready for a real vacation to get in the woods and get away
There you
from all
go.
that stuff that I do. We do really good at catering to corporate groups.
Yeah, that's great.
But then I do tons of individuals as well. Anybody, don't feel like you got to have a group together. Obviously, we'll take one person, we'll take 30 people.
Yeah.
It's just, we can accommodate for you.
Yeah.
And then if you call and you go, yeah, well, I want to come visit, but I don't really know what time. This is what kind of fisherman I am. This is what I like to do. When should I come?
Right.
You'll
help
let
'em
us
out.
be your resource. Call us. We can tell you.
Chad, that's great. It sounds like you're a one-stop shop for it all. And I'd say between you and Dally's, pretty much people are covered down there with great local knowledge and experience and an opportunity to get out and catch a lot of trout and maybe some big ones. Folks, if you like to...
Absolutely. One thing I will mention right there just real quick
Yeah.
is that even your spin fishing buddy
Okay.
that wants to go, even your spin fishing buddy that wants to go but won't pick up a fly rod, I've got spin fishing buddies that work here as well. We can hire you a spin fishing guide. I'm not going to take you.
All right.
You don't
You
want
specialize.
me to take you because I don't know what to do with one of those spin fishing
Yeah.
rods.
Yeah. Well, you come a long way in 15 years, haven't you?
Right. But we can accommodate.
Okay.
Okay. So even all our spin fishermen out there, we got you.
Okay.
Well, there you have it, folks. Hope you enjoyed the show, and thank you for listening. We'll be sure to post Chad's contact info on the Destination Angler website and pictures of Chad and the White River on our Facebook and Instagram pages. You can DM me or email me with comments and suggestions at shaig50@gmail.com. If you like the show, please share with a buddy. As always, our music is by Brothers Fountain. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you again soon. Tight lines, everyone.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see.